The endless, unforgiving steppe of 12th century Mongolia was a crucible. It was a vast sea of grass under an endless sky, a land of brutal winters, scarce resources, and constant, shifting warfare between nomadic tribes. For centuries, this world was locked in a brutal cycle. Alliances were made and broken, clans rose and fell, and raids for horses, resources, and wives were a fact of life. This constant infighting kept the Mongol peoples fractured and weak, a threat only to each other. But from this crucible, one man would emerge, not merely to survive, but to unite its warring peoples and unleash them upon the world, creating the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Before he was the Great Khan, he was a boy named Temujin. He was born around 1162, the son of Yasugi, a minor but respected chieftain of a Mongol clan. His early life was one of privilege by the standards of the steppe, but this world shattered when he was just 9 years old. While traveling, his father was treacherously poisoned by a rival Tartar tribe. Returning to their clan, young Temujin and his family expected to be cared for. Instead, they were betrayed. Deemed too weak to lead, the clan abandoned them, a mother and her young children, leaving them to fend for themselves on the open steppe. It was a death sentence. They survived on roots, rodents, and the sheer, unbending will of his mother, Hoylin. These years of hardship forged in Temujin a deep understanding of loyalty, betrayal, and the brutal necessities of survival. Survival was a brutal calculus, a reality that led to a grim confrontation within his own family. A dispute over a hunted fish with his half-brother, Begtur, escalated. For Temujin, this was not about a single meal. It was about authority and who would lead their desperate family. In an act of calculated cruelty that shocked even the harsh standards of the steppe, Temujin and his brother Hasar ambushed and killed Begtur. This dark event cemented his position as the dominant male in his family, an early chilling sign of the ruthlessness he would later employ on a global scale. But his father's enemies had not forgotten him. As a teenager, he was hunted down and captured by the Taichud, the very clan that had abandoned him. He was locked in a kang, a heavy wooden collar, and paraded as a slave. For anyone else, this humiliation would have been the end. But for Temujin, it was merely a lesson. He waited for his moment, and during a festival, he made a daring escape, hiding in a river with only his nose above the water until nightfall, before slipping away into the darkness. He had learned that even in chains, the will to survive could create its own freedom. A free man once more, Temujin began the long, arduous process of rebuilding his power. His first act was to find Borte, the woman he had been betrothed to as a child. Their marriage was not just a personal union, but a vital strategic alliance. He then journeyed to Togrul, Khan of the powerful Karite tribe, and his father's sworn blood brother, or Anda. Presenting a sable coat, Borte's dowry as a gift, Temujin cleverly invoked the old bonds of loyalty and placed himself under the protection of a powerful ruler, a masterstroke that put him back on the political map. His newfound stability was short-lived. A rival tribe, the Merkits, raided his camp and kidnapped his new wife, Borte. Enraged, Temujin called upon his powerful ally Togrul and another charismatic young leader with whom he had sworn his own oath of blood brotherhood, Jamukha. The bond of an Anda was the most sacred in Mongol society, a pact of eternal loyalty deeper than that of biological brothers. Together, their combined forces crushed the Merkits and rescued Borte. This victory was a turning point. It established Temujin as a capable military leader, and warriors began to flock to his banner. But this success also planted the seeds of his greatest rivalry. Temujin and Jamukha, once blood brothers, were fundamentally different leaders. For Jamukha, a man's worth was determined by his bloodline. He was a fierce defender of the traditional aristocratic order. But for Temujin, who had been betrayed by his own noble clan, a man's worth was determined by his loyalty and skill alone. This revolutionary idea of meritocracy was incredibly appealing to the common warriors. Soon, the two Ondas were on a collision course, and their personal friendship fractured into a bitter civil war that would define the future of Mongolia. One of the earliest major clashes was the Battle of the 13 Sides in 1190. Temujin, though his forces were growing, was still the underdog. He was decisively defeated by Jamukha's larger, more traditional army. He was forced to retreat and spend years rebuilding his strength. But it was Jamukha's actions after his victory that proved to be his greatest mistake. To make an example, he had 70 of the captured chieftains boiled alive in large cauldrons. This horrific act of cruelty backfired spectacularly. It terrified the other clans, and many warriors, disgusted by his brutality, defected to Temujin, whose reputation for rewarding loyalty, even in defeat, seemed a much better alternative. Jamukha had won the battle, but he was losing the war for the hearts and minds of the Mongol people. Over the next decade, Temujin used his growing influence and tactical brilliance to systematically defeat the great tribes that had once dominated the steppe: the Tartars, the Karaites, and the powerful Naimans. He did not just conquer them, he absorbed them, breaking up their old tribal structures and integrating their warriors into his own army, creating a single, unified military force bound by loyalty to him alone. Finally, in the year 1206, the wars were over. Temujin called a kurultai, a grand assembly of all the chieftains of the steppe. On the banks of the Onan River, he was proclaimed the supreme ruler of all the Mongol peoples. It was here that he was given the name he would carry into history: Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The era of endless petty tribal warfare was over. The Mongol nation had been born. But his vision went beyond mere conquest. To hold his new nation together, Genghis Khan created a revolutionary legal code known as the Great Yasa. It established rule of law, created religious freedom for all, outlawed the kidnapping of women, and established secure trade routes. It was this code, this shared set of laws, that truly transformed a collection of warring tribes into a unified state, ready to expand. A boy who started with nothing had, through sheer will and strategic genius, forged a people into an empire. The stage was now set for that empire to be unleashed upon the world. And that is the architecture of the rise of Genghis Khan. Remember, history is more than a story. It's a code. And there was always another layer to decrypt. Subscribe and continue the investigation with us.